It had been 12 years. 12 years of shared mornings, whispered dreams, and quiet sacrifices. 12 years of building a life together, or so I thought. But lately, something had shifted. Something was wrong. At first, it was small things. He'd come home late from work, his tie slightly askew, the faint scent of perfume lingering on his collar. Was it just my imagination? Then came the unexplained disappearances. Hours would pass without a word. I'd call, text, but he'd reply with terse excuses, working late, caught up in traffic, lost track of time. I told myself to trust him. After all, we'd built this life together. We'd weathered storms before, but the gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. And then, one evening, it all came crashing down. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the kitchen as I sat at the table, waiting. Dinner was cold now, the candles long extinguished. My phone buzzed, another message from him. Don't wait up. Business dinner running late. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. Business dinner? It was Friday night. What kind of business kept him out this late? A part of me wanted to believe him, to let it go, but another part, a louder, angrier part, refused to be silenced. I grabbed my coat and keys, my heart pounding as I stepped into the cool evening air. The car ride was a blur, my mind racing with possibilities. Where could he be? Who could he be with? When I pulled into the parking lot of the downtown bistro, I spotted his car immediately. It was parked near the back, tucked away in a shadowy corner. My stomach churned. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and walked inside. The place was dimly lit, filled with the low murmur of voices in clinking glasses. It didn't take long to find him. There he was, sitting at a corner booth, laughing at something she said. Horror. She was young, too young, with long dark hair and a smile that made my chest ache. I stood there, frozen, as he reached across the table, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned in and kissed her. Not a friendly peck, not a casual goodbye, but a kiss that spoke of intimacy, of stolen moments. My heart shattered. Everything around me seemed to fade, the noise, the lights, the other patrons. All I could see was him, and her. Tears blurred my vision as I turned and stumbled out of the restaurant, clutching my coat tightly around me. The drive home was a haze. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. How could he do this? How could he betray me like this? Memories flashed through my mind. Our wedding day, the birth of our daughter, lazy Sunday mornings spent in bed. Was none of it real? By the time he got home, I was waiting for him in the living room, my arms crossed, my eyes red and swollen. He looked surprised to see me still awake, but his expression quickly hardened when he saw my face. You're still up? He asked casually, shrugging off his coat. His voice was calm, too calm, as if nothing was wrong, as if he hadn't just destroyed everything we'd built. I stood up, my legs trembling beneath me. I followed you tonight, I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. I saw you, with her. For a moment, he froze, his eyes widened, and I could see the panic flicker across his face. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. What are you talking about? He asked flatly, crossing his arms over his chest. Don't lie to me, I shouted, my voice breaking. I saw you kissing her, at the bistro downtown. Who is she? Daniel? How long has this been going on? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I didn't want you to find out like this. Find out like what? I interrupted, my voice rising. That you've been cheating on me? That you've been lying to me for months? His jaw tightened, and he took a step closer, his eyes boring into mine. You have no idea what it's been like for me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You've been so wrapped up in yourself, in your own little world, that you haven't even noticed how unhappy I've been. I stared at him, stunned. Unhappy? You've been unhappy? What about me, Daniel? What about our marriage, our family? Did any of that matter to you? He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. Oh, don't play the victim here. This isn't just on me. You pushed me away. You stopped caring a long time ago. That's not true, I cried, tears streaming down my face. I loved you. I gave you everything. Everything? He repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I've been giving everything while you took and took and took. I took a step back, reeling from his words. Had I really been so blind? So selfish? For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was to blame. But then I remembered the way he'd kissed her, the way he'd smiled at her, and my anger flared again. This isn't about me, I said, my voice trembling. This is about you choosing to betray me, to throw away everything we had. He sneered, his lips curling in disgust. We had nothing left. Emily, don't you get it? This marriage has been dead for years. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I staggered back, clutching the edge of the couch for support. Get out, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He raised an eyebrow. What did you say? I said get out, I screamed, my voice echoing through the house. Leave, now. For a moment, he just stood there, glaring at me. Then, without a word, he turned and stormed out of the room. I heard the front door slam shut, the sound reverberating through the empty house. I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs. How had it come to this? How had we gone from vows whispered in love to screams hurled in anger? The hours passed in a blur. I cried until there were no tears left, until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. And then, when the sun finally peeked through the curtains, I stood up, wiping my face with the back of my hand. What now? I thought, staring at the mess of emotions swirling inside me. Where do I go from here? The knock on the door startled me. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Was it him? Had he come back? Part of me hoped it was, that he'd realized his mistake and wanted to fix things. But another part, a colder, harder part, knew better. I opened the door, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't Daniel, it was him. The man standing at the door wasn't a stranger, but his presence felt like a shockwave rippling through my already shattered world. It was Mark, Daniel's oldest friend, and someone I had trusted implicitly. His face was pale, his expression torn between guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. My stomach churned as I stepped back, letting him in without a word. The silence between us was heavy, charged with unspoken truths. Emily, he began, his voice low and hesitant. I need to tell you something. I crossed my arms over my chest, bracing myself for whatever came next. My mind raced, trying to piece together why Mark would show up now. Of all times, was he here to defend Daniel? To comfort me? Or was there something darker lurking beneath his words? What is it? I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Did Daniel send you? Mark flinched, his gaze dropping to the floor. No, he doesn't know I'm here, but I can't keep the secret anymore, not after what happened tonight. Secret? The word echoed in my mind, sending a chill down my spine. What could he possibly be hiding? He took a deep breath, running a hand through his disheveled hair. It's about Sarah. My best friend's name hit me like a punch to the gut. Sarah, the woman who had been by my side through every major milestone of my life, my wedding, the birth of my children, even the darkest moments of my marriage. She was supposed to be my rock, my confidant, but the way Mark said her name made my blood run cold. What about Sarah? I demanded, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay composed. Mark hesitated, his jaw tightening as if he were wrestling with the weight of his confession. Then, finally, he met my eyes. She and Daniel, they've been seeing each other. 4 months. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in around me. No, that couldn't be true. Sarah wouldn't do that to me. She loved me, she cared about me, and Daniel loved me too, didn't he? At least, he used to, or so I'd thought. You're lying, I snapped, though the accusation lacked conviction. Deep down, a part of me knew he wasn't. The signs had been there all along: Sarah's sudden distance, the way she avoided my calls, the cryptic comments she'd made about needing to find herself. I'd chalked it up to stress or midlife crisis. But now it all made sense. I wish I was, Mark said quietly, but I saw them together. More than once. They thought they were being careful. But I know what I saw. Tears burned in my eyes, blurring my vision as I struggled to process his words. How could they do this to me? How could they both betray me like this? Anger surged within me, hot and uncontrollable, mingling with the pain until I felt like I might explode. Why are you telling me this? I whispered, my voice barely audible. What do you want from me? Mark stepped closer, his expression softening. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because, he paused, his gaze searching mine, because I care about you, Emily, more than I should. His admission caught me off guard, leaving me speechless. Care about me? What did that even mean? Was this some twisted attempt to win me over while I was vulnerable? Or was he genuinely trying to help? Before I could respond, the sound of a key turning in the lock broke the tension. We both turned toward the door just as it swung open, revealing Daniel. His shirt was rumpled, his face flushed, and his eyes widened when he saw Mark standing in our living room. What the hell are you doing here? Daniel barked, his voice dripping with venom. Mark squared his shoulders, meeting Daniel's glare head on. I told her about you and Sarah. Daniel froze, his expression shifting from anger to panic in an instant. His gaze darted to me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of guilt, but it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, replaced by defiance. So what? He spat, slamming the door behind him. You think that makes you some kind of hero? You don't know anything about our marriage. I know enough to see that you've destroyed it. Mark shot back, his voice rising. And for what? A fling with her best friend? How pathetic can you get? The tension in the room reached a boiling point, the air thick with animosity. I stood there, paralyzed, as the two men I thought I knew hurled accusations at each other, their voices blurred together, a cacophony of anger and betrayal, until I couldn't take it anymore. Stop, I shouted, cutting through the chaos. Both men fell silent, their heads snapping in my direction. I glared at Daniel, my heart pounding with a mix of fury and despair. Is it true? Were you sleeping with Sarah? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Answer me, I screamed, my voice breaking under the strain. Daniel flinched, running a hand over his face. Yes, he admitted, his tone hollow. It's true. The confirmation hit me like a tidal wave, sweeping away any lingering hope that this was all some horrible misunderstanding. My knees buckled, and I stumbled back, collapsing onto the couch. Tears streamed down my face as I buried my head in my hands, the weight of his betrayal crushing me. Mark moved toward me, but Daniel intercepted him, shoving him back with a force that sent him stumbling. Stay away from her, Daniel snarled, his fists clenched at his sides. This is none of your business. Like hell it isn't, Mark shot back, shoving Daniel in return. Someone has to look out for her since you clearly don't give a damn. Their voices rose again, their argument escalating into a full-blown shouting match. I sat there, numb and broken, as the two men continued to tear each other apart. The room spun around me, the walls closing in until I felt like I couldn't breathe. Enough, I screamed, jumping to my feet. Both men froze, their faces filled with shock. Get out, both of you. They stared at me, stunned into silence. Then, slowly, Daniel turned and walked out the door without another word. Mark lingered for a moment, his expression fraught with conflict. Emily, he started, but I cut him off. Now. He hesitated, then nodded, slipping out the door and closing it quietly behind him. Alone at last, I sank back onto the couch, my body trembling with exhaustion. My mind raced, replaying the events of the past hour over and over again. How could this happen? How could my husband and my best friend do this to me? The questions swirled in my head, each one more painful than the last. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, a new emotion began to take root, something dark and vengeful. If they thought they could destroy me and walk away unscathed, they were wrong, dead wrong. The knock on the door startled me out of my reverie. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the door, a mixture of fear and anticipation coursing through me. Who could it be this time? Part of me wanted to ignore it, to shut out the world and wallow in my misery, but another part, a stronger, angrier part, wanted answers. I stood, wiping the tears from my face, and walked to the door. Taking a deep breath, I opened it. And there she was, Sarah, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed, and her hands clutching a crumpled tissue. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, and the sight of her filled me with a strange mix of rage and pity. "Emily," she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, let me explain.